It turns out that 72% of cannabis users also drink alcohol, and many of those are wine consumers. Cannabis consumers also tend to be Epicureans. So we really like the finer things in life, much like the wine consumer. And in California, it's just becoming this mainstream product. So it seems like there's people from all groups, ages that are enjoying cannabis right now.
Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 62. In today's episode, I'm chatting with Jamie Evans, known as the Herb Somm, or Sommelier. We talk about pairing wine and weed, or cannabis. Now that cannabis is legal in Canada and in many U.S. states, are you as curious as I am about the combination and similarities between the two? And what's next? A reserved Cabernet cannabis? Or should I reverse that? That's exactly what you'll learn in today's fascinating conversation. This chat first aired on my regular Facebook Live video show that you can catch every second Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. I'll put a link to that in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/62. Come join us. It's a great chat. I'll also include links to Jamie's website, books, social media handles, and the video version of this conversation at nataliemclean.com/62. So why not make 2020 the year that you move from feeling maybe a little confused about all the wines in the liquor store to feeling confident about every wine you buy every time and knowing exactly which dish will pair perfectly with it? I can help you with that. Sign up for my free online video wine class, The 5 Wine and Food Pairing Mistakes That Can Ruin Your Dinner and How to Fix Them Forever. Go to nataliemclean.com/class and choose a time and date that work for you. Okay, on with the show. Let me introduce my next guest more completely. You're going to really enjoy this chat with her. Our guest this evening is known as the Herb Somm. She is an educator, event host, and writer specializing in gourmet cannabis, food, recipes, and wine. Born and raised in California, she earned her degree in wine and viticulture with a concentration in wine business at California Polytechnic University. She also studied enology at the University of Adelaide, Australia, and the Engineering School of Enology in Switzerland. She has been featured in the San Francisco Chronicle, Los Angeles Times, Pop Sugar, Mother Jones, Edible San Francisco, MSN Lifestyle, and she was named one of the top 40 under 40 influencers by Wine Enthusiast magazine. She joins me from Los Angeles. Welcome, Jamie Evans.
Hello. I got some rosé.
Oh, me too. That's what I picked. We did not coordinate that.
Yeah.
So we are thinking along the same lines.
We are.
All right.
It's a good day for rosé.
It's a good day for rosé. Absolutely. So Jamie, you have a fascinating background. And as I mentioned, here in Canada, cannabis is going to be legal October 17th. So we're all very interested in this topic. Maybe you can tell me, before we dive into that, what was the exact moment where you really became fascinated with cannabis? I know your wine background, but what got you into cannabis, so to speak?
Well, I've always been a cannabis enthusiast, and in college, I'd always recreationally used cannabis. I always thought it was very similar to the wine I was studying in my classes. So there's a lot of similar aromas and flavors, but I never really did the deep dive to learn more about it until the beginning of 2017. I actually witnessed a really terrible car accident and I was having a really tough time sleeping. So this is when I kind of went back to cannabis. I didn't want to use the hardcore sleeping pills that doctors recommend. So I used cannabis. It dramatically changed how I was feeling. I got better sleep, and it just helped me overall. So seeing how it benefited my life, I was very inspired and wanted to keep learning about it and learning about all the health benefits. After that, I attended a wine and weed gathering. It was a women wine and weed speech in Oakland. And Debbie Goldsberry, she's the executive director of Magnolia Wellness. She was a speaker and she was so inspiring. After that moment, I knew I wanted to get involved in the industry. So I figured, okay, what am I good at? What are my skills? And of course, wine, food, and the gourmet world were just things that I'm always naturally gravitated towards. So I'm like, okay, how can I tie cannabis into this? That's when Herb Somm was born in March of 2017. I really focus just on the culinary side of cannabis now.
Okay, awesome. You're the perfect guest for us to be talking to in the lead up to this legalization. So just to summarize, currently 9 states, I believe, have legalized recreational marijuana and 30 altogether have approved medical marijuana. When cannabis first became legal in the United States, did wine drinkers flock to it, or was it a different audience, or was there just some overlap? I mean, who was attracted to cannabis?
So since I'm based in California and really know that market the best, we do have some of the best cannabis and wine in the world. At least that's what I think. But it seems like there is probably one of the largest crossovers between wine and cannabis consumers in California. And there's actually a recent study done by BDS Analytics, which is one of the leading cannabis consumer insights company here in California. And it turns out that 72% of cannabis users also drink alcohol, and many of those are wine consumers. Cannabis consumers also tend to be Epicureans. So we really like the finer things in life, much like the wine consumer. And in California, it's just becoming this mainstream product. So it seems like there's people from all groups, ages that are enjoying cannabis right now.
That's awesome. What is CBD oil, Jamie?
So CBD is the non-psychoactive component of cannabis. Basically, there's common cannabinoids. So THC, which kind of gives you that head high. So that's a cannabinoid. But then you also have CBD, which is the non-psychoactive part. The thing about this is CBD can also be derived from hemp. So maybe that's why it's legal, is because hemp, at least in the United States, is legal in all 50 states. So that's why a lot of companies here are actually taking the CBD out of hemp rather than cannabis derived.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So you're in California. Is there stigma to cannabis? Are people still sort of getting used to it because it was formerly an illegal drug?
I think there's definitely still a stigma. At least it's starting to go away. And I think this is largely in part to all the education that's been coming out. I think cannabis brands are doing such a good job of educating people about the health benefits of cannabis, how you can incorporate it into your daily lifestyle. And now that we're seeing some major headlines like Coca-Cola, they're interested in getting infused beverages.
Oh, really? I didn't hear that.
Yeah, so this announcement came on Monday. So they might be looking at doing an infused beverage, which is huge news because Coca-Cola, as we all know, is one of the oldest classic American brands. So for them to want to get involved with cannabis, I think that's huge. And also Constellation is invested with Canopy Growth up in Canada.
Which is a Canadian company. Yeah, it was a $4 billion investment. It's huge.
I think they first invested in fall of last year, and then they upped their bet, I think last month in August, to another $4 billion investment.
That's amazing.
So yeah, that's huge.
And Constellation used to be Artera. So it owns brands like Kim Crawford, Ruffino, Mondavi, Ravenswood. And when it was here in Canada as well, it owned Jackson Triggs, Inniskillen. There's a real strong link there between Canada and the US. But yeah, sorry, Jamie, continue.
Yeah, so I think like all of these things together are really going to help break that stigma in the United States and beyond.
Right. And so you've touched on this, but I know you're not a doctor and this isn't medical advice, but what are the medical benefits that are discussed when it comes to cannabis?
Like I said before, cannabis can really help with sleep. It's great as anti-stress, anti-anxiety. It really helps anti-inflammatory purposes. So a big thing is like CBD cream. It's really great for arthritis. There's so many benefits for cannabis, and it really comes down to terpenes, which I know we're going to get to in a little bit.
We will. You're champing at the bit to get into terpenes. But I've read too, especially with cancer patients who are recovering from chemotherapy, it helps not only with pain reduction, but also re-stimulating the appetite, which often gets lost.
Absolutely. And it helps with nausea as well. It has many benefits, and there's a lot of different ways you can use cannabis as well. So you can do edibles, you can smoke the flower, you can vape, there's tincture drops, there's lotions. So there's so many wonderful ways you can experience the benefits of
My
cannabis.
goodness. And so dosing must be very important, like
Oh,
knowing
yeah.
what you've got in those edibles. And I mean, it's all new to us. These are very basic
hmm
questions.
And I think the cannabis companies in California and the United States, they've done a really good job at precise dosing. So if you're eating an edible, that edible should be the exact dose that the company says. And especially these new laws that have come out this year, who have kind of mandated this new change, have really helped like the quality and the precise dosing.
Wow. Okay. So in 2017, legal cannabis in the United States was a $9.7 billion market, and it's
Yeah.
expected to grow to $25 billion by
Mhm.
2021. So what are you hearing from winemakers and distributors? You've talked a little bit about this with Constellation and Coca-Cola. Is there anything else? Like, are we going to start seeing weed-infused wines or conversely, wine-flavored cannabis edibles? I mean, what kind of products might we see?
Well, in August, I actually went to the Wine and Weed Symposium, which is held in Santa Rosa. This conference was really meant to bring together the best and the brightest from the cannabis industry and the wine industry. And the main thing that I got from that conference was there's just a lot of curiosity. So, from winemakers and distributors, they're really wondering how can we get involved legally right now with cannabis? So, whether that be with tourism, events, infused beverages. I actually have a cool example of an infused beverage. Looks like a mini bottle of champagne. But this is actually an infused cranberry drink that's been infused with 5 milligrams of THC. And I think a big part of what is bringing the cannabis and wine industry together is infused beverages. So I think this category is very exciting. I think we will start to see some infused wines, but I think the key thing here is it has to be non alcoholic. So, someone who did a really good job at this, they're called Rebel Coast Winery in California. They made a non alcoholic THC infused Sauvignon Blanc.
So is
Yeah.
it illegal to combine wine that has alcohol in it with cannabis then?
Yeah, as the current law states. But if
Okay.
you do an infused beverage and you just have THC and you're selling it in a dispensary at this point, that's legal.
Okay, great. So do you think we're going to see restaurant wine lists also offer
Oh,
cannabis?
I hope so. Actually, right now, I'm a part of a group called Crop to Kitchen. We are creating a movement in San Francisco to create cannabis restaurants because right now there are no cannabis restaurants. So in the future, we're really hoping that this could be a reality. And there's some amazing cannabis chefs out there who deserve a restaurant. So we're writing regulations right now to making some proposed laws that hopefully will go through. And I think once we can prove that cannabis restaurants work and people can consume infused food safely and responsibly, I think after that, then maybe we can see some wines being incorporated. But this all comes down to moderation. So when you're
Yeah.
combining the two, you have to go low, start slow in moderation.
Go low, start slow. Yes. Okay. So before we get to that, because I want to talk about the intermingling of those two drugs, cannabis restaurants, that would mean the chef is using cannabis in various dishes the way he or she might
Yeah,
use truffles, like inflected with
exactly.
truffles, but
Yeah.
cannabis. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So cannabis shops right now are treating cannabis as an ingredient.
Mhm.
So it's such a beautiful way to enhance the meal. It enhances the flavors. It's just a really complex plant to work with because all the aromas and flavors. It's an amazing dining experience if you haven't been to an infused dinner before. So
Huh. I was reading a bit about this, and do you find that those who have cannabis and they have it with wine drink less wine?
I think that's true because that goes back to the moderation. I host events myself. I host
Yes.
Thursday Infused. And what I have seen is people drink less wine. They're very careful and they're using wine to enhance the meal. And the cannabis kind of works in that same way. I firmly believe that cannabis, food, and wine belong together.
Do they have different impacts? Like cannabis, my stereotype is that you get mellow, but wine
Well,
does that too. I don't
yeah,
know.
wine does that too. And I know we're going to talk about terpenes, but these are really the things that make you feel the way you feel when you consume cannabis. So you may feel sleepy or you may feel mellow. There's also strains that make you feel uplifted and excited.
Huh, different strains. Are there any risks beyond immoderation? That's always a risk, whether you're talking about wine or cannabis, but are there any special risks to combining the two drugs?
I think there's risks, especially if you're on other medications. Like I would
Okay.
never recommend mixing all three of those, certainly not. But really, if you love wine and you're curious about cannabis, I do recommend just doing some experiments at your house, getting familiar with the flavors, and find a strain that works for you. I mean, that's the best thing I can advise. And everyone is so different. So it
Sure.
really depends on what effects, what benefit, and the flavors that really draw your attention.
And your own body chemistry. And
Yeah,
as always, whenever we talk about health related topics, this isn't medical advice, folks. We
right.
are not doctors, but we're trying to
No.
give you some informed information where you can take
Mhm.
that to your doctor and make your own decisions. So, terpenes, you've mentioned them. Now let's get into them.
Yay!
What are terpenes?
Okay, well, I love talking about terpenes because this is what really allows us to pair cannabis and wine. So, terpenes are the organic compounds that give cannabis all of the wonderful aromas and flavors you perceive. They're produced in the same gland as common cannabinoids, THC and CBD, and they provide a wide range of health benefits. But it's important to note that terpenes, they're not just found in cannabis. They're found in many herbs, different flowers, vegetables, fruits, insects, and even wine has terpenes. So it's really interesting. The terpenes give us the ability to pair flavors with ingredients, with wine, and over 200 have been identified so far in cannabis. But today we'll talk about 6 common terpenes and you can just dive right into them, right?
Absolutely. Why don't
Okay.
you explain, kind of give us the overview of the 6 main terpenes that we
Yeah.
should know?
Perfect. So lemons, limes, tangerines, grapefruits, they have a terpene called limonene. Limonene is a terpene that gives these uplifting, energizing side effects. And many cannabis strains have limonene in them, such as Tangy, Lemon Kush, OG Kush, which are some really popular strains out here in California. And like I said before, these are really good for mood enhancing side effects. It's a great daytime terpene as well.
Mhm.
You are looking for something maybe for brunch, I would definitely recommend a Tangy. And if you're thinking about pairing wines with this too, lemon, lime, grapefruit, tangerine. So these are all common aromas and flavors that you find in white wines, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. So I can
yeah,
see where the natural pairing, the flavor
yeah,
echoing would be. Yes.
exactly. Yeah. So like Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Albarino, these are all wines that would pair with a strain that's high in lime.
And you've got a pairing guide for wine and
I
cannabis,
do.
right? And this is great because it's almost like the aroma flavor wheel that Ann Noble came up with
Right.
from California. Okay, so I can see the flavors echoing each other. What is the
Mhm.
next set of terpenes that you describe?
I love cannabis that has linalool.
What is Lidolol?
So linalool is a terpene that has floral aromas. So
Okay.
in this glass, I put lavender. I always think of linalool as a terpene that reminds me of being at the spa because it makes you feel very relaxed, rejuvenated. If you're smelling like lavender lotion, it kind of makes you feel that same way. So some common strains that have linalool are Lavender OG, LA Confidential, and Amnesia Haze.
LA Confidential. Okay, you have to tell me what that is.
LA Confidential is just a popular strain that has been very popular, I think, in California, but it does have high levels of linalool. It makes you feel very relaxed. It has floral notes in it because of this terpene. And just some other aromas are citrus blossom, violet. If you ever smell like kind of like a dried rose characteristic in your cannabis, that's also due to linalool. But if you think about wines, there's so many floral wines out there. One of the first things that comes to mind is Muscat.
Yep.
Riesling, Nebbiolo can also have this beautiful, like crushed rose characteristic to it. So those are just some common wines that I would pair with strains that are high in linalool.
Awesome. Awesome.
I think that creating the perfect pairing has a lot to do with balance. So when you're thinking of a pairing, you want the weight of the cannabis to match the weight of the wine. Weight in cannabis is really determined by the effect and potency, and weight in wine is determined by the body and richness. So when you're thinking of that in other terms, you want to think of like light, refreshing strains with light, refreshing wines and big, bold, maybe sleepy, sedative strains with bigger, bolder wines, such as like a Zinfandel, Cabernet Sauvignon, Bordeaux, and so on. It's really about balance.
All right. Good. Balance, moderation. Have you heard of the show Bong Appetit?
Bon Appetit is put on by Vice, and it's a really cool show about the culinary side of cannabis. And actually, when I was starting to learn about cannabis and research all of the amazing chefs that are out there, I would watch this show. It's great. It's educational. And if you are interested in infused foods, it's very entertaining to watch. If you have an interest in culinary side of cannabis, you should watch it.
Is there a cannabis cookbook that you know of?
Oh, there is. And actually, my dear friend, Green Carol, and she's actually just releasing her cookbook called Edibles. I think it's on Amazon.com, just research Edibles by Green Carol and Stephanie Hua. That's the other writer who owns Mellows. They make incredible food. I've worked with Corinne personally and have tasted her cooking. So if you're looking for a good cookbook, I'd recommend that one for sure.
Interesting. Now, when I was reading, and you can comment on this, Jamie, is that 1 in 10 people may become addicted to cannabis. I'm sure there's similar statistics for wine, and it's riskier if you start trying cannabis when you're a teenager, which you should not do. What have you read, or what's the advice? Is cannabis more addictive, do you know, or what are the risks there?
I think what's super interesting right now is cannabis is actually, at least what I've been reading, is actually helping people get out of addiction. So it's helping people get out of their opioid addiction, which has been a big problem here in the United States. Now, I mean, instead of thinking of cannabis as the entry drug, we're thinking of cannabis as the exit drug. So that's just kind of the common trend that I've been reading about lately.
It's very interesting positioning. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think the growth of the marijuana and cannabis markets will have an impact on the wine industry? Jamie, what do you think?
So I think this is a very hot topic right now, and there's been a lot of articles coming out about this. So I think right now the wine industry can kind of think of the cannabis industry as a competitor, yet a friend. I think David Downs wrote an article where he called both the industries frenemies. So I think that's very true, but I think there's a lot more room for collaboration, especially when you're seeing like the infused beverage category, the opportunity to grow that. And we're already seeing some collaborations right now. And a good example of that would be Heineken owns a brewery called Lagunitas Beer, which is in Sonoma County. So they've actually partnered with a cannabis company to create an infused beverage called Hi-Fi Hops. So I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of these types of products where these two industries are coming together to create a really cool product to grow a brand new category. So,
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I think we got to 2 groups of terpenes. So
I have a lot more.
Back to the terpenes. What would be the third category?
So we have beta caryophyllene. In cannabis, you'll often perceive this kind of like spiciness. So some common aromas are black pepper, cinnamon, clover, and this type of terpene is really good for anti-inflammatory purposes. It's really helpful for anti-anxiety. And it's actually the only terpene that binds to the CB1 receptor in your endocannabinoid system. I know this all probably sounds like a foreign language.
Can you just back that up? I would love to know what that means. So define all your terms, what you just said, please.
So the endocannabinoid system, every person has this in your body. And so basically there's 2 main receptors that you have. So you have CB1 and CB2.
In your brain.
They're all throughout your body.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so what is so great about cannabis is that THC and CBD actually bind to these receptors. This is why you get all these health benefits, is because they're actually interacting with your endocannabinoid system.
What does endocannabinoid system mean? Can you define that?
So the endocannabinoid system, that's what's in your body. This might be wrong, but I believe I read that they used to call it the endocrine system. But now cannabis research has come out and it is the endocannabinoid system.
Okay.
Pretty high level science.
Gotcha. That's all right. So carry on with the third group of terpenes.
So beta caryophyllene, like I was saying, is very spicy. So when you're thinking about like a good wine to pair this with, Zinfandel works really well. Cabernet Sauvignon, Petit Syrah, these are all really nice wine pairings. Some strains, if you're looking for strains, Northern Lights has a lot of beta caryophyllene, Skywalker OG, and also Rockstar. So these are all common strains you'll find in California.
So when you say strains, are you talking about some particular grower, or how do you define strains?
So if you think about strains, you can compare that to wine varietals. Okay. So think of like Rockstar as you would a Cabernet Sauvignon. So it's kind of like that comparison, if you think of it that way. But each strain has its complete different genetics. Some might be a combination of two different strains. I mean, there's thousands out there. So I'm still learning about all of them.
Wow.
I mean, just like wine, there's always more varietals to learn about and explore.
Are we going to see a master of cannabis like our master of wine, or?
I know that there's a program right now that the Trichome Institute is putting on that actually trains people to become a cannabis sommelier. So it's a very stringent test. I know a few people who have passed, but I think teaching people about terroir, growing regions, very similar to what a wine sommelier learns. So it's going to be interesting to see people and how they kind of take this new certificate to like all the job opportunities that could be available in the future.
Wow.
So,
yeah, it's really opening up. Okay, so your fourth category of terpenes then would be, Jamie.
So now I have a terpene called myrcene. Myrcene is a terpene that has these earthy, forest floor, mixed herbs characteristics. And it's also known to give you kind of these relaxing, sedating effects. So this terpene is really great for like nighttime use. But an interesting thing about myrcene is it can have tropical fruit notes as well. So sometimes you'll perceive like some mango or pineapple in the cannabis, and that's due to myrcene. And mango, the fruit, is actually really high in this myrcene naturally as well.
All right. So number 5.
This terpene is called alpha pinene. I think it's one of the most common terpenes found in cannabis, but this really gives kind of that pine needle or like that pine tree characteristic to cannabis, but also you can smell like rosemary and dill. And this really provides energy. It's great for anti-inflammatory. It kind of clears your head when you smoke this type of flower that's high in alpha pinene. So it makes you very alert and focused. When I think about this terpene with wine, I think a great pairing would be a white wine that's really high in acidity, maybe like a Pinot Gris. I think Vermentino is a really nice pairing, as well as like a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, because New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc just has that natural grassiness, that green characteristic that you're looking for that really ties well with alpha pinene.
Oh, wow. So I think we're on number 6, are we?
Number 6 is called transneurolidol. And so this terpene is really known for like perfuminess that you might find in cannabis. So think of jasmine or ginger root. Tea tree oil also has high levels of transneurolidol. And when you're thinking about perfuminess, there's also a lot of wines that have this characteristic. Rosés, for instance, like we're drinking today, very perfumey.
Absolutely. Yes.
In Argentina, there's a varietal called terpenes, which is very notable to be this big, perfumey, beautiful. It's a beautiful varietal, but it's very perfumey. I think Gewürztraminer is also a very nice pairing with transneurolidol. And I think a very common strain that's high, there's actually 3 I can list. So we have Island Sweet Skunk. I love all the names.
These names are wild.
We have Skywalker OG, which also has high levels of linalool, which I listed earlier, and Banana Kush. So look for these types of strains if you're looking for that transneurolidol.
All right. So, I mean, I can't believe we've flown by. I could ask you a whole lot more questions, but what do you see in the future? Where is it going, Jamie? What can we expect as wine lovers? What's going to happen with cannabis and what should we be looking for?
I think the future for cannabis is very bright, and I'm excited to see cannabis just used as a gourmet product and how we can incorporate it into different dining experiences. Like we talked about restaurants with wine lists. That'd be so awesome one day. I mean, I would love to try some infused wines as well, those non-alcoholic wines, and taste through those. I think it's going to be super interesting. And I think another thing that's going to be huge is tourism.
Right. In California alone, wine tourism is $4 billion. So do you think people are going to be visiting like they visit winery tasting rooms?
I know right now there's actually some tours that are popping up, mostly in Sonoma County, but also in Humboldt. So I know they're working towards getting their permits to do this, but I think it's going to be amazing. You'll be able to go to these cannabis farms. You'll be able to see the grows, touch the plant. And it's so fascinating. Like I've been to a few farms myself. There's just so much you learn by going there. It's fascinating. And we're also seeing wine and cannabis tours as well being developed because there's such a want and demand for people traveling to California to have these experiences together. I'm actually going on a cannabis and wine tour on October 3rd. So I'll have to report back to you and let you know how it goes because it's the first one I've been on.
Awesome. We'd love to hear that.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear how it goes. I have so much more. I didn't get through nearly all the questions I want to ask you, Jamie, but is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to mention now?
Well, like I mentioned before, I do host an event series called Thursday Infused in San Francisco. So my next event is October 25th, and I've partnered with a amazing cannabis chef. His name is Chef Holden Jagger, along with his sister Rachel Birkins, who is actually the cannabis editor for Clever Root magazine, but she's worked with the Tasting Panel magazine as well as Somm Journal for the past 15 years. So they're coming out to San Francisco to be my partners. It's going to be a fabulous experience. And you can learn more, just see more about my events at thursdayinfused.com.
Where else can we find you on social, on your own personal site?
My main site is theherbsomm.com. So that's where my blog lives at. That's where all of my educational materials live at. Instagram is probably my biggest social media network that I use. I post a lot of my event photos there. I post a lot of education, and you can find me on Instagram at theherbsomm. So please follow me. I'll follow you back, and I look forward to keep educating and speaking with you about cannabis and wine.
Oh, Jamie, you're a treat.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been so educational. I feel so much more informed now about this. I mean, it's just not enough reading the newspapers, especially when you come at it from a wine bent. You kind of want to know that angle. But thank you, and wish you all the luck with all your projects, your events. And again, thank you for spending some of your time with us tonight, Jamie.
Absolutely. And I just want to say cheers to everyone.
Cheers. Yes.
And I do have a glass of cannabis here. So cheers.
There you go. Awesome. Ching. Take care, Jamie. Bye-bye. Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this chat with Jamie Evans. Here are my takeaways. Number 1, I'm intrigued with Jamie's insights on the high overlap, pun intended, between those who love wine and cannabis, with both groups being Epicureans in search of new taste experiences. Number 2, I never realized that there was such a range of flavors and aromas in cannabis, and I'm interested in trying cannabis-infused food and pairing it with wine. And finally, number 3, I'm always paying attention to the health benefits of wine. So it's interesting to hear about those associated with cannabis, including its role as an exit drug and how it can induce relaxation but without the calories. If you like this episode, please tell a friend about it, especially one who's interested in the fascinating wine and cannabis pairing tips Jamie shared. My podcast is easy to find, whether you search Google on its name, Unreserved Wine Talk, or on mine. You'll find links to Jamie's website, books, social media handles, the video version of this conversation, and how you can find me on Facebook every second Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/62. Finally, if you want to learn why red wine shouldn't always be the wine you go to for pairing many cheeses, join me in a free online video class at nataliemclean.com/class. I can't wait to share more wine stories with you next week. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this one. I hope something great is in your glass this week. Perhaps a wine that has similar aromas to those found in one of those strains of cannabis. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So, subscribe for free now at nataliemclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.